All right, welcome to the joint drop site Breaking Points live stream that is hopefully not inaugurating World War III. Earlier this evening, Israel struck targets and civilian targets as well all across Iran. We are following this very closely. I'm going to be joined very soon by my colleague at Dropsite, Maz Hussein. If anybody from Breaking Points is able to join us later, they will be here. We'll also be bringing in guests as they become available. We'll be what we want to. Let's just start first with this announcement by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declaring that Israel has effectively launched a war on Iran and that it will continue indefinitely. And I'm going to stop in between Netanyahu's remarks to contextualize as we go through. Bear with me as I'm figuring out these different tools. Okay, here we go.
Moments ago, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a targeted military operation to roll back the Iranian threat to Israel's very survival. This operation will continue for as many days as it takes to remove this threat. For decades.
Okay, one piece of context to add there. According to U.S. intelligence assessments that have been made public, Iran was not pursuing a nuclear weapon. And so the idea that there was a nuclear threat that needed to be eliminated from Iran is contradicted by public U.S. intel assessments. Those very same assessments say that if Iran was struck by Israel, then that would tip the balance in favor of their pursuit of a nuclear weapon.
The tyrants of Tehran have brazenly, openly called for Israel's destruction. They've backed up their genocidal rhetoric with a program to develop nuclear weapons. In recent years, Iran has produced enough highly enriched uranium for 9 atom bombs. 9. In recent months, Iran has taken steps that it has never taken before, steps to weaponize this enriched uranium. And if not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year.
Netanyahu has been saying for 20 to 25 years now that Iran is within days, weeks, or months. He varies in the time span he gives of when when Iran is going to be able to produce a nuclear weapon. But he has been saying for 2 decades that it could happen any month.
It could be within a few months, less than a year. This is a clear and present danger to Israel's very survival. 80 years ago, the Jewish people were the victims of a Holocaust perpetrated by the Nazi regime. Today, the Jewish state refuses to be a victim of a nuclear Holocaust perpetrated by the Iranian regime. Now, as Prime Minister, I've made it clear time and again, Israel will never allow those who call for our annihilation to develop the means to achieve that goal. Tonight, Israel backs those words with action.
So let's just to talk a little bit about the action that they've taken so far. They have, according to the reports that we're getting, and initial reports are often erroneous in moments like this, but we're being told that they have struck nuclear scientists. They have struck top elements of the military within the Iranian government.
We struck at the heart of Iran's nuclear enrichment program. We struck at the heart of Iran's nuclear weaponization program. We targeted Iran's main enrichment facility in Natanz.
There have been reports that Natanz has been seen with smoke coming out of it. There's confirmation that they did attack Natanz.
Iran's leading nuclear scientists working on the Iranian bomb.
Again, so they are acknowledging that they attacked scientists here.
We also struck at the heart of Iran's ballistic missile program. Last year, Iran fired 300 ballistic missiles at Israel. Each of these missiles carries a ton of explosives.
Except that wasn't the case. The military experts can, maybe get in the comments and give the precise numbers here. But when Iran launched its ballistic missiles, it did so in more of a symbolic fashion to try to show what the capacity was, but put very small payloads and aimed them away from civilian areas. If you recall, there were Israel was making fun of Iran for not, killing civilians with its attack with its last ballistic missile,
and threatens the lives of hundreds of people. Soon, those missiles could carry a nuclear payload, threatening the lives not of hundreds, but of millions. Iran is gearing up to produce 10,000s of those ballistic missiles within 3 years. Now, just imagine 10,000 tons of TNT.
Iran, I believe, and Maz can clarify this, but Iran, I believe, is producing 50 ballistic, or was before this attack, producing 50 ballistic missiles a month, which would add up to, you guys do the math, 600 a year. So I don't know how he's getting to 10,000.
Landing on a country the size of New Jersey. This is an intolerable threat. It too.
Netanyahu went to high school just next to New Jersey at Cheltenham High School in suburban Philadelphia.
Must be stopped. Iran is now working on what it calls the new plan to destroy Israel. You see, the old plan failed. Iran and its proxies tried to encircle Israel with a ring of fire and to attack us with the horrible attack of October 7th. But the people of Israel, the soldiers of Israel, rose like lions to defend our country. We crushed Hamas, we devastated Hezbollah, we hit Iranian proxies in Syria and Yemen. And when Iran directly attacked us twice last year, we struck back inside Iran itself.
And so we're getting confirmation now from, this is Iran TV, which is state TV. And so, well, I'll tell you what they're saying, and then you can decide whether or not you want to believe it. They are saying the IRGC's top commander was killed, Faryadun Abbasi. So this sounds like a credible claim if it's coming from Iran TV. You wouldn't expect them to, lie about casualties in their very top ranks. The commander of the Air Defense Force, Gholami Ali Rashid, also said to be killed by Iran, reported by Iran TV, and two nuclear scientists that they have named so far.
Yet in defending ourselves, we also defend others. We defend our Arab neighbors. They too have suffered from Iran's campaign of chaos and carnage. Our actions against Iran's proxy Hezbollah led to the establishment of a new government in Lebanon and the collapse of Assad's murderous regime in Syria. The peoples of those two countries now have a chance for a different future, a better future. So too do the brave people of Iran, and I have a message for them. Our fight is not with you. Our fight is with the brutal dictatorship that has oppressed you for 46 years. I believe that the day of your liberation is near. And when that happens, the great friendship between our two ancient peoples will flourish once again. I want to assure the civilized world, we will not let the world's most dangerous regime get the world's most dangerous weapons. And Iran plans to give those weapons, nuclear weapons, to its terrorist proxies. That would make the nightmare of nuclear terrorism all too real.
There's no evidence of that.
The increasing range of Iran's ballistic missiles would bring that nuclear nightmare to the cities of Europe and eventually to America. Remember,
I think defenders of Israel have a reasonable argument if they want to say that Iran is a threat to Israel. Iran has been in proxy war, with Israel, on death to Israel. They also death to America, but death to Israel. This is a reasonable claim. It is a reasonable claim for defenders of Israel to say that Iran is in a hostile relationship with Israel. To claim that Iran is a threat to nuke European capitals or to nuke the United States, up until today, was utterly delusional. What world emerges from this? We don't know.
Iran calls Israel the small Satan. It calls America the great Satan. And this is why,
just to be clear, Iran and the United States entered into a nuclear agreement in 2015 to keep the nuclear program monitored and under control. Trump walked away from that agreement. Trump won. Joe Biden refused to even enter back into any serious negotiations to bring it back. Trump, to his credit, up until today, was involved in nuclear talks with Iran. They were scheduled to meet again on Sunday. So yes, the United States, Iran uses outrageous rhetoric, great Satan, and all that, death to America, when it talks about the United States. The United States uses over-the-top rhetoric all the time when it talks about Iran, but they were actively engaged in peace talks.
For decades, it's led millions in the chants of death to Israel and death to America. Today, Israel is responding to those genocidal calls with action and with a call of our own. Long live Israel and long live America. Our action will help make the world a much safer place. I want to thank President Trump for his leadership in confronting Iran's nuclear weapons program. He has made clear time and again that Iran cannot have a nuclear enrichment program. Today, it is clear that Iran is just buying for time. It refuses to agree to this basic requirement of peaceful nations. That is why we have no choice.
I'm sorry, I zoned for a second. Is he saying that not having a nuclear weapon is a basic requirement for? Hold on, let me roll that back. Because Israel, not only does Israel have nuclear weapons, it does not acknowledge it and is not part of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. So let me roll that back here.
In confronting Iran's nuclear weapons program, he has made clear time and again that Iran cannot have a nuclear enrichment program. Today, it is clear that Iran is just buying for time. It refuses to agree to this basic requirement of peaceful nations. That is why we have no choice but to act.
Okay, so a basic requirement of peaceful nations is to not have a nuclear program? Yet Israel has an undeclared illegal nuclear program? Okay, whatever. Let's keep going.
And act now. The hardest decision any leader has to make is to thwart a danger before it is fully materialized. Nearly a century ago, facing the Nazis, a generation of leaders failed to act in time. They were paralyzed by the horrors of World War I. They were determined to avoid war at all costs, and they got the worst war ever. They adopted a policy of appeasement. They closed their eyes and ears to all the warning signs. That failure to act resulted in World War II, the deadliest war in history. It claimed the lives of 60 million, including 6 million Jews, a third of my people. After that war, the Jewish people and the Jewish state vowed never again. Well, never again is now. Today, Israel has shown that we have learned the lessons of history. When enemies vow to destroy you, believe them. When enemies build weapons of mass death, stop them. As the Bible teaches us, when someone comes to kill you, rise and act first. This is exactly what Israel has done today. We have risen like lions to defend ourselves. Over 3,000 years ago, Moses gave the people of Israel a message that has steeled their resolve ever since. Be strong and courageous, he said. Today, our strong and courageous soldiers and people stand together to defend ourselves against those who seek our...
News of fatalities from this strike continue to emerge, and it does seem to have been a devastating blow to the leadership in Iran. We have Iranian state media confirming the killing of Revolutionary Guards Chief Salami, Hossein Salami. He's the commander-in-chief of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC. So, well, we can talk about all of this in a moment. Let's finish with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Our destruction. And by defending ourselves, we defend many others, and we roll back a murderous tyranny. Generations from now, history will record that our generation stood its ground, acted in time, and secured our common future. May God bless Israel. May God bless the forces of civilization everywhere.
Okay. So what do we know so far about this strike? So, and Murtaza will be here in a moment. Give me 1 second. Marco Rubio put out a statement, which, let me see if I can. Well, Marco Rubio put out a very interesting statement, saying essentially and directly that the United States was not involved in this strike, but that the United States was informed by its Israeli allies that Israel planned to carry out this attack. And then the last line of the statement was, Iran must not or should not, retaliate by targeting U.S. Quote interests or personnel. I talked to an Iranian analyst about this moments ago, and his assessment was that Netanyahu persuaded Trump that this would somehow increase Trump's leverage in the ongoing nuclear talks, and that the only way that Netanyahu could get Trump's permission for a strike like this, presumably that he did have Trump's permission for it, would be in the context of those negotiations. Now, that is ludicrous. Like, the idea that this furthers rather than destroys Trump's nuclear talks is utterly absurd. Doesn't mean that that's wrong. It may be that Netanyahu persuaded Trump of this, total fantasy. Rubio's statement came after I spoke with this guy, and it aligns with that idea, because Rubio still seems to be putting out some sort of, I wouldn't call it an olive branch, but look, this wasn't us. This was the Israelis. Do not attack us in response. We weren't involved with this. I'm hearing that Trump is going to start speaking soon. Let me see how we can get this. Give me one moment. I will pull up. Let me check the White House. Oh, Brad is gonna look for it for my drop site producer. Thank you, Brad. So to talk about the goal here, clearly, that as Israel is laying it out, is to utterly cripple and set back the nuclear program by directly hitting the sites as much as is possible, because many of them are buried deep underground and can't be hit. To hit as many of the nuclear scientists, just to kill them. Israel has been trying to kill and successfully killing nuclear scientists for many decades now, and clearly targeted some tonight and killed some tonight. Then to also kill as many of the military figures whose job it would be to produce a response, the Iranian response to this. There has also been reporting in Israeli media that the Mossad launched a joint operation inside Iran, which involved sabotage and other attacks on the ballistic missile program. The ballistic missile program is the true serious threat to Israel at this very moment. The question is, will Iran fire them? Can Iran fire them? And can they fire enough to get them through Israeli air defenses? And what the Israelis are implying here is that, through their penetration of the Iranian government, they hope that they have effectively, basically neutered Iran's ability to respond. with any serious and overwhelming firepower, and did so by taking out all of the people whose job it would be to do that, and making it just logistically impossible to launch these ballistic missiles. And the idea that Iran is going to that Israel is going to carry this out for days or even weeks goes to this idea that they're going to just continue to pummel Iran and not allow it to get off its back and launch a counterattack. All right, let me see what we've got here. Give me 1 second. I'll pull up the while I'm waiting for Maz. I'll pull up the chat here, and you can put questions either. We're live on X, on Breaking Point's YouTube channel, and Drop Site's YouTube channel, also on Substack, and so I'll also talk about the analysis that we're getting back from kind of the Israeli side so far. What I'm seeing is celebration across the board. And I think Israeli analysts are understanding this attack in the context of their ability to not only to kill Hassan Nasrallah, to assassinate him in Beirut, and also to basically with force put an end to Hezbollah's ability to fire rockets. And let me put this one up here just to give you a sense of what else, what the claims coming out of Iran are. Give me 1 second. All right, let me share this. So this is Amit Siegel, close to Netanyahu and the government there, saying, quote, the likelihood is increasing that the Iranian general staff, including the Iranian chief of staff and senior nuclear scientists, were eliminated in the opening strike. So, Israelis are quite confident that they have, through their kind of intelligence penetration of the Iranian government, been able to deal a blow across the board here in a way that will leave them at least relatively protected from the expected retaliation. So a lot of people I saw when they saw this news said, why is Israel doing this? We have negotiations taking place. It's supposed to be on Sunday. There's an agreement six weeks ago or so. It looked like the two sides, Iran and the U.S., had effectively reached the contours of an agreement that Iran would be able to continue with a civilian nuclear enrichment program. There would be very strict monitoring. There would be a lifting of some sanctions. And then there would be this regional kind of civilian nuclear enrichment, a consortium that would include the UAE, perhaps some Gulf countries, and Iran would be part of that and would be gradually reintegrated kind of into a region where they have been, at odds with, the UAE, Qatar, in particular Saudi Arabia, and they would agree then to destroy a lot of their, their ability to, break out into weaponized enrichment. And so it seemed like that was close, like that the two sides had effectively agreed along those lines. You then had Netanyahu come out and say that civilian nuclear enrichment was a red line for him. Any enrichment was a red line. You then had Trump come out and say that any enrichment was a red line for the United States. This was 4 or 5 hours after Steve Witkoff, the envoy who was handling these negotiations, had sent a proposal to Iran that allowed for, I think, 3.67% enrichment, like a small level of civilian nuclear enrichment so that Iran could continue with its civilian nuclear program. And so the question became, well, what's going on here? What is the U.S. position? Is it what Netanyahu said, and then Trump followed, that enrichment is a red line, or is some civilian enrichment allowed? More reporting emerged over at Dropsite. We reported, and the New York Times followed, that the proposal, and Barak Ravid at Axios reported first, that there is in fact enrichment allowed for in the agreement. The Iranians sent back a counter proposal, and then on Sunday the two sides were planned to meet. And the question was, would they be able to kind of square this circle? The hope among people that didn't want to see a war break out was that all of this talk of bombing Iran was just bluster to try to give the U.S. a little more leverage to get a better deal, on Sunday when they went in. But so why would Israel, if Iran is willing to give up its military nuclear program and allow in inspectors and rejoin the region, why would Israel want to disrupt that? That's a question that a lot of people are asking. And one response to that is that Israel does not want a nuclear weapon-free Iran to have sanctions lifted and to reintegrate with the region. That is a negative outcome as far as Israel is concerned, because they believe that Iran is implacably hostile to them, and that Iran reintegrating with the region might put them off balance again, and it might disrupt potential efforts at normalization with Saudi Arabia and some others. And so from Israel's perspective, it appears that they're willing to risk Iran attempting to break out towards a nuclear weapon, because that is, whether they're going to be able to accomplish it or not, like, all of the reporting was that if Israel did this, Iran would then move to try to make a nuclear weapon. So Israel has calculated that it would rather risk having in a nuclear Iran that continues to live under sanctions and that is not reintegrated into the region, and whose economy cannot recover. Because you lift sanctions on Iran, they're a highly educated population with a country with an enormous amount going for it. It could see consistent GDP growth year over year for a very long time, which develops its kind of soft power in the region as well. Israel clearly does not want to see that happen, and so a much weakened, smashed Iran with the potential for a nuclear weapon is the bet that Israel is going for, rather than a reintegrated Iran that agrees to allow in inspectors and agrees to forego its nuclear program. Let me see, where's Trump? Any word yet? All right, give me 1 second. I'm gonna look into this. All right. Okay. Let me see what else our team over at Dropsite has picked up since we began talking. Let's see. Unofficial reports in Iran about an attack on the heavy water facility in Iraq, which is nuclear related, so it would not be terribly surprising, but that is unconfirmed. More media reports confirming the killing of the IRGC chief. Let's see. So Israeli military chief of staff, Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir, he said, quote, "We launched the strike because the time had come. We reached the point of no return. We cannot wait for another time to act. We have no choice. History, both distant and recent, has taught us that in the face of ambitions to destroy us, we must not bow our heads, and so we fight to preserve our existence. Freedom is granted to those who are willing to fight for it." Now, I've seen some, I believe, Ori Goldberg and some others have argued that this is, even assuming it is successful in a tactical sense beyond Israel's kind of wildest dreams, that they kill every scientist they're trying to kill, every chief of staff, every top general that they're trying to kill, and they even, diffuse. They even diffuse the ballistic missile program. That this could represent a turning point internationally. That this is a rogue action beyond that which the civilized world is willing to kind of risk its stability. And the Western world relies heavily on its rhetoric, its values, because it doesn't offer, it offers its people, anxiety, exploitation, a lot of misery, but the values that they testify to, liberalism, freedom, pluralism, human rights, democracy, like these values are, according to the West, what separates them from, as Netanyahu bluntly puts it, the uncivilized world. To have the kind of leading point of the spear of the West acting this erratically and barbarically in, we talked earlier today, you can find this video on our channel about how Israel has now cut off all internet to Gaza, as is attacking basically all of its neighbors, except for Egypt at this point. I guess they haven't attacked Jordan recently, but to have the values so in conflict with the stated values of the Western world makes Israel a significant liability. That may just be cope, and there will be no consequences, either from Iran or from the rest, or from the West. All right, Omaz says he's ready. Let's let him in. All right, let me send him the link. Sorry, my bad. Have folks seen an update on Trump, when he's coming out? Let me put the White House feed up here. All right, there he is. Oz, welcome to the stream.
Yo.
You just file your piece for drop site?
Yeah, they just put in the finishing touches. It should go out in a few minutes.
All right. So if you're not signed up to get our emails yet, you go to dropsitenews.com and you'll get Maz's story rounding up the night dropped in your inbox. Yeah. What are you seeing?
Well, it's this looks like pretty widespread strikes across Iran, not just in nuclear facilities, but also targeting senior leadership, military officials, and officials involved with the nuclear program itself, senior scientists. We saw strikes inside major population centers inside Iran, in Tehran, in the capital, pretty densely populated. You could say bougie, upscale parts of the city where people associated with the government, elites would have been living. And some of these strikes were effective. According to Iranian reports, several senior officials, including deputy head of the IRGC, reportedly were killed in these attacks. So I think it's interesting. The Israeli way of fighting, it requires, it relies very heavily on this element of surprise and maybe fighting a quick, decisive war, attacking leadership and so forth. You saw with the pager attacks, the element of shock and awe. So this current conflict, it's just started a few hours ago. Israeli officials already said it may go for a few days, maybe even longer than that. But it's a question if Israel could sustain weeks or months of reciprocal strikes and so forth to paralyze the Israeli economy or result in targeting ballistic missile attacks in population centers, which the Iranians may engage in now in retaliation. And if they'll have more tricks, you could say, to pull out of the hat. They pulled quite a few tricks out in the initial phase today. I think we don't have the full damage assessment, but significant numbers of people were killed, and the strikes took place in areas where people were probably not expecting them to happen. But if there's a war of attrition, Israel's population is about a tenth of Iran's. It's not as much. And they have vulnerabilities as well, too. So we have to see how the Iranians choose to retaliate. I think there are two major possibilities. One big advantage Israel has over Iran is that Iran effectively has two primary modes of war. There's subconventional war, by sponsoring militias and carrying out attacks, which are just below the threshold of what you'd consider a war. And they have just all in huge missile barrages and types of mass warfare that you see more likely in a Russia-Ukraine type situation. But they don't have that middle range, like what the Israelis did with the Air Force and these attacks. Iran kind of has, they're not really in or they're all in. So their retaliation could take one of those, they could take two forms. It could either be a more symbolic, limited retaliation, maybe striking a few sites inside Israel, carrying out some attacks, and then going back to some sort of stasis. Or instead of that, or even potentially in addition to that, what they could do is carry out attacks in Israel and then withdraw from the non-proliferation treaty, the nuclear non-proliferation treaty.
Which they threatened to do today, I believe.
They threatened to do today if they're attacked. And technically, according to the terms of the treaty, which technically they're also still following the rules of the letter of the law, if they're attacked, that's grounds for withdrawing from the treaty according to its own.
That's reasonable if you strike the treaty.
And people in Iran are, people in the government, a lot of people have been calling for that for quite some time, out of the argument that, hey, we're abiding by the treaty, we're subject to all the monitoring and so forth, but we're not getting any of the benefit. We're heavily sanctioned, one of the most sanctioned countries on earth. We're being attacked all the time. It's not giving us what adherence to a treaty should get us. And by the way, the Israelis are not party to the NPT, and they have nuclear weapons, and they're not party to it. So they may withdraw from the NPT and test a nuclear weapon. And they could do that, in addition or in lieu to a major extended ballistic missile campaign. But I think it makes more sense, probably from their perspective, to just do symbolic attacks and then withdraw from the NPT, because they're going to need those ballistic missiles for the future if they're going to have a nuclear weapon and may even want to start the process of arming their ballistic missiles or nuclear-capable missiles with nuclear warheads. So I think that that's a very, very likely possibility. And from the Israeli perspective, what they really want and need, for multiple reasons, is the U.S. to become involved in the conflict very, very intensively, both to defend them against Iranian attacks and also to help them carry out more attacks inside Iran. Israel, for all its capabilities, does not really have the ability to carry out an extended conflict inside Iran effectively. They can't really destroy the nuclear sites, the fortified nuclear sites like Natanz and Fordo. At best, they maybe can damage them, but these are built inside, some cases, inside mountains, literally, or deep, deep underground, a mile underground, things like that. Even their heaviest weapons can't really destroy them, even if they can hit some of the entrances or ventilation areas, and so forth. So they need America to be involved. America has B-2 bombers, which theoretically could destroy these sites. But even if you hit the sites, how do you verify you destroyed them? And how do you know they don't have other sites that are outside your purview? How do you know no nuclear material was diverted? You need to invade, actually. You need to send troops on the ground in small or large capacity to verify that. And who's going to do that? The Israelis don't really have the capacity to do that. Only the U.S. can do it. So I think their goal now, Netanyahu's goal, is to engineer a situation where the U.S. has to become involved, either by triggering an Iranian over-retaliation or some other means of generating enough political pressure to press America into the situation.
Let me read you, because I mentioned this Marco Rubio statement earlier today, but I only paraphrased it for people. Let me pull it up and read it so we can parse it kind of word for word. Statement from Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Tonight, Israel took unilateral action against Iran, period. What do you think of that sentence? First of all, why, like, that he leads with that, and secondly, the veracity of it.
You know, it's interesting. It's very difficult to say at the moment because, on one hand, the U.S. in the last 48 hours has taken very, very significant steps to draw down its personnel from the region.
Mm-hmm.
It's pulled those people out. It may have had foreknowledge of the attacks without, taking action. But, what does that mean, unilateral? What does it mean we're not involved?
Yeah, let me read the rest of it because I think they kind of acknowledge that. We are not involved in strikes against Iran, and our top priority is protecting American forces in the region. Israel advised us that they believe this action was necessary for its self-defense. So that seems to be suggesting foreknowledge strongly. President Trump and the administration have taken all necessary steps to protect our forces. So yeah, clearly they're saying we were told about it and remain in close contact with our regional partners. Let me be clear, Iran should not target U.S. interests or personnel.
Yeah, so, it's interesting. When you say not involved, obviously the U.S., as far as we know, the U.S. planes didn't carry out attacks. But was there surveillance? Was there intelligence? The intelligence that would need to carry out these attacks would have had to have been gathered out potentially for many years. Obviously, there's logistical support that the U.S. provides Israel, diplomatic support, but also the U.S. armed Israel. U.S. armed Israel in a way for free. So, and all of these operations it carries out in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Syria, and now Iran. Overwhelmingly, they use American weapons, which if they had to pay for, they wouldn't actually be able to afford to do all these wars. It's a very, very simple thing. So the way that the U.S. is not involved, you really have to use your imagination to say the U.S. is not involved per se. That said, the fact that U.S. planes didn't take part in the conflict and the U.S. would like Iran not to retaliate by hitting its bases in the region, it reflects to me that the U.S. administration knows that these wars are extremely unpopular in America, including among important segments of the Trump administration's base. And if they start taking casualties, which is quite likely if you're fighting a war with Iran, people will be livid. They won't actually accept or understand it. People want out of the Middle East, not more wars in the Middle East. And even these Israeli attacks, if they're owned by Israel on its face, for the most part, people are going to view them in the base skeptically, and they already are. You can see this in some of the discourses taking place among supporters of the president. A lot of people are not happy with what this portends, and they're mad about the potential. We don't know if this is true, but the potential that this may have been conducted to sabotage the last round of talks, which are scheduled for Sunday. Now, it's possible those talks.
So the cynical counter argument that people are making now is that these nuclear talks were cover to create the element of surprise that Israel wants.
Yes, especially this last one, because it was canceled or allegedly canceled, then put back on for uncertain reasons. It's hard to say, but even if that's the case, the optics, and some Democratic politicians are pointing it out, the optics, if you take it at face value, or that's what happened. But you don't really know. But having said that, I think that this would only become an acute political problem in the U.S. if American service members start to be directly involved and start losing their lives in the conflict with Iran. I think that the U.S. public is extremely casualty averse after the terrible experiences in Iraq and Afghanistan, which were really for nothing. They don't want a war with Iran that involves U.S. service members. They may be able to tolerate one in which the U.S. is providing all the background support, but not being operating at the front line itself. Maybe that's kind of what it is. But I think the Iranians probably view skeptically. But in another way, it's a useful fiction, you could say, because if they target U.S. bases, then the U.S. B-2 bombers and so forth probably will get involved in Iran, which maybe even if the Iranians inflict significant casualties on American bases, they could take a lot more casualties if the Americans are hitting them directly. Whereas Israel really has limited capacity to what they can do to Iran. They can cause harm, and they are causing harm, but there's a ceiling to that the U.S. does not necessarily share.
Meanwhile, Israeli officials have been issuing blind quotes to the press saying that the U.S. was involved. And we'll see if that moves from blind quotes to on the record. But you also have kind of proxies for the government who've been making similar statements. Let me put Meet Siegel back up. We had him earlier. Let's go with him again. Here he says, to anyone mistakenly thinking that the United States did not coordinate with Israel, on April 12th, Trump gave a 60-day deadline to reach an agreement with Iran. Today is day 61. And so if the United States is actively put aside the fact of the matter of whether there was involvement, if the United States is actively trying to put out the narrative that they were not involved, what does it mean that the Israelis are undermining that narrative publicly?
Well, it's interesting. Before this war started this evening, I was working on stories, interviewing security officials, former U.S. military officials who worked on, and partly on planning or military planning around contingencies for a war with Iran. And that story should go out in the next few minutes with that analysis. But interesting, what they told me, former DIA people, was that a Defense Intelligence Agency, was that they knew, and the Israelis knew, that Israel can't really do profound damage to Iran's nuclear program or degrade its military in a significant way in strikes. The only purpose of Israeli strikes really are to trigger a larger war, which draws the United States into direct conflict in Iran and keeps America in the Middle East militarily for another generation, at least. A very, very long time. Because Israel, from its own perspective, is sort of alone, doesn't really have many friends, has pretty bad relations with most of the countries in the region, at best cold relations, and very hostile relations with others. They really need America to be heavily involved at the level they are right now. And an Iran war is one of the few cards they can play, if it's successful in driving the U.S. into it, that could accomplish that. So I think that in that sense, while the U.S. is playing down its involvement, the Israelis playing it up is an attempt to sort of engineer a situation where the narrative clearly is that the U.S. was involved in targeting Iran, and Iran has to retaliate to the U.S., or at least feels motivated to retaliate against the U.S. directly. I don't think Iran necessarily would take the bait for that, so we have to wait and see what happens and what the U.S. does and what the Iranians do. But that's very, very much, the Israelis don't want to send the message that they're alone in this, because it's kind of a scary place to be alone if you're a country of 9 million people. At the same time, they really do want to engineer a conflict between the U.S. and Iran. They want America to fight all its enemies for in the Middle East. And that's a very blunt way of putting it. But that's what Netanyahu has been doing his entire political career. He's been trying to turn the people of the Middle East into America's enemies. He's been pretty successful in some ways, actually. Doing this maybe for the 1970s, you could say. He's been in various ways pushing on this theme. And Iran is sort of the greatest target. I will say, though, that I don't think that Israel's strategic position, regardless of what it does in the short term, is very comfortable or very positive, because I don't think that America really has the bandwidth to fight in the Middle East for another 30 years. They have really pressing other issues to deal with at home in East Asia. A lot of people in the administration desperately want to get out of the Middle East to focus on what they see as more pressing U.S. matters in that part of the world. So at the end of the day, we're not going to kill every Iranian. You're not going to kill every Lebanese person or every Syrian or every Palestinian or every Turk even or Egyptian. And then what? What are you going to do then? I think that's long-term. Netanyahu is very good at acting in the short-term interest right now, but let's see what happens when the dust settles.
Yeah, Netanyahu just won a vote in the Knesset to not have his government dissolved, which means that a vote cannot be brought for another 6 months. So he basically has 6 months, like no matter what, which may have, and it was a very close, very narrow vote, and I would imagine that Netanyahu may have played this card to win some of those votes over his side. Like, look, these are the plans. This is what's going to happen. Don't throw me out of power right now. Otherwise, you're going to be undermining this plan that we have rolled out. Now, if you're Iran, and given everything that you've said about Israel's challenged strategic position long term, and kind of inability to think long term, because Netanyahu has been in power off and on for decades now, and is, like as you said, he's a short-term thinker. He's a survivalist. Whatever is, he's going to fight Hamas or he's going to fund Hamas. It does not matter to him. Whatever is going to keep him in power for the next several weeks, and turn those weeks into decades. If you're Iran, what are the different camps saying when it comes to how to respond to this? I mean, obviously, we're not in those meetings, and they're happening right now among the people who haven't been killed. But what are the different camps that would argue for massive retaliation or restraint, and try to play the card of, we were deeply wronged. This is uncivilized. We've done nothing wrong, and yet we were attacked anyway. Do something.
It's funny. Although he's a bête noire of so many people, it's ironic. The Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is probably the most restrained figure, most in favor of restraint figure in
kind of
the establishment.
Kind of a knock on him from some quarters.
Exactly. Yeah, he's in his mid-80s. He's old man. He's sickly and so forth. A lot of people inside Iran, the Iranian establishment. I know people ever read the book by Yukio Mishima, Runaway Horses. It's about Imperial Japan, and the younger officials in that book, they're young men who were very radical. They think the emperor is like a wuss, and he's screwing over Japan. They need to take action immediately. They have a different, more vigorous mindset, you could say. That's what Iran is like. That's what the Iranian establishment is like. People are frustrated, have been for a very long time, with the Ayatollah Khamenei, not because he's so radical, because he's not radical enough, and he's doing things, acting in a passive manner, which has steadily allowed Iran's adversaries to eliminate its deterrence, allowed them to do incredible damage to Hezbollah. Hezbollah also reacted very passively, for the most part, initially to the October 7th war when that began. And the Israelis just decided to salami slice them. They kind of escalated the things on their own terms and gradually wiped them out. It's a very powerful organization that Iran spent many, many decades building. In the same way, people in Iran, many younger people in Iran, in the establishment at least, they've been criticizing the decision not to develop nuclear weapons. The Ayatollah Khamenei, that's his decision. He said that they're against our values. He issued a religious injunction saying that you can't develop these weapons, they're evil, XYZ. Not a lot of people, I should say that a lot of people are not happy with that decision, and there'll be severe pressure now to amend that. I think that people will also want to retaliate in kind, in the manner that Israel struck major civilian population centers inside Iran. Iran has a huge ballistic missile stockpile. They will want to, it's a blow against their pride as well too, because for all the attacks Israel's done against the region for a very long time, they haven't really bombed downtown Tehran. These are new scenes that we've never kind of witnessed before. It's shocking to people that this has happened. They will retaliate to that shock, and they also don't want to create a new normal where Israel can treat Tehran like it treats Gaza City, or even Damascus. It can just bomb it whenever it wants. They're trying to, this is a very important part, Israel is trying to gradually eradicate Iran's sovereignty and make it normal to bomb Iran, like the way that Iraq's sovereignty in the 90s kind of became like a fiction. It's kind of going there whenever you want. And slowly in doing so, you can degrade the country and the state such that it becomes a weak edifice which may just rot and topple over at some point at an opportune moment. That's what they're trying to do. These top-level assassinations, brazenly bombing inside Iran. So the Iranians, if they have the political will, mainly to do it, they could say that it's very painful to violate our sovereignty. They could do something quite painful and deterrent to the Israelis and make them feel this is not worth it, or it's something we have to think hard about before we do it. And what that could take? It could be striking major civilian or strategic sites inside Israel. They could strike ports. They could strike power stations. They could strike major administrative and government buildings inside the country. All these things are possible. And, in turn, the Israelis will also retaliate. They'll hit maybe oil facilities inside Iran. This could get really, really bad for both countries. And as much as Israel has, powerful air force and things like this, and support from the Americans, cyber warfare and so forth, Israel's a very small country. It doesn't have what you call strategic depth. It's a very narrow strip of territory. There are not that many important sites in the country. You can map out all the important nuclear power plants in general, the critical ports. It's not that much. And Iran has maybe 4,000 long-range ballistic missiles. The estimates kind of vary. If they chose to deploy all of them, I'm not sure they would, but if they did, they could do significant damage to Israel. And I'll say another thing: Israel has been very successful fighting its non-state militias with light weaponry. But that's not, in a way, they should be successful in that. If they're not successful in that, what are you really doing then? It hasn't fought a war against a major state adversary in many, many decades. We don't know if they're even what their doctrine, how much they plan for that. I'm sure they have planned to fight a war with Iran to some degree, but they'll have an acid test now. And I think that they really do need America to become involved, to defend them against those missiles and to strike the launch sites, to get involved in the conflict in a very intimate way, including putting Americans' lives at risk. Without that, it would be very dire. And I'm not sure if they would have proceeded in this initial step once they had assurances privately from the American side that something like that may be on the table.
Israel is saying that the Mossad launched a kind of joint operation inside Iran and went after particularly not just the scientists, but also the kind of ballistic missile program to try to diffuse it. You also have an interest in weapons that goes far beyond mine. Like, it's just not, I just don't get weapons. It's not something I've kind of ever dug into. But can you tell me a little bit about their ballistic missile program? Like, how would Israel diffuse it? How would it make them unable to fire them? Are they mobile? Does Israel know where all the ballistic missile launch sites are, such that if they penetrate sufficiently, they can actually, get in there and, with the very advanced cyber surveillance technology that they have, get in there and render these inoperable for at least a substantial amount of time.
I got really into weapons. I've always been into it, but the more I felt the international human rights law was not really better to take interest in defense.
Yeah, I mean, I've been reading your stuff and following it because I'm coming around to that understanding that, I think you floated a book recently that you were reading about how, how the adaptation and adoption of weapons has a role in history that so many kind of materialists overlook.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a very critical point. So in the case of Iran, I'm sure the Israelis have prepared cyber warfare and other measures to target Iran's ballistic missile production capacity. And in the previous strikes last year in October, they did hit some ballistic missile targets, but it's unclear how much damage those strikes did, because it seems from satellite footage they were operational again relatively soon. It's not totally clear. The Iranians already confirmed these things, but there's indications that they ramped up their production shortly thereafter. And we saw in Axios today that apparently Senate Republicans were briefed that the Iranians were back to manufacturing 50 ballistic missiles every month after October. So they were building the store back up. In those True Promise 1 and 2 attacks, they fired hundreds of missiles. Those missiles, I should say that Israel has this missile defense program, David Sling, and also the THAAD program that the U.S. also, equipment that the U.S. has based there defending Israel from these missile attacks, mainly from the Yemenis, from Ansar al-Houthis. But those ballistic missile systems are meant to shoot down one missile. They're not meant to shoot down maybe two missiles. They're not meant to intercept hundreds of missiles spamming you constantly. They're overwhelmed. And we saw that they were overwhelmed last October when the Iranians hit those air bases and so forth. And air bases are probably the least valuable military target. They're hard to hit effectively. They're very, very big. It's more like a message they sent. If you were to fire those missiles into an urban area, the level of destruction, you could turn Tel Aviv into a part of Gaza with the level of destruction. The Iranians are believed to have thousands of these missiles. You can't really intercept them. And they're distributed throughout the country in what the Iranians refer to as missile cities. And they've shown some videos recently of these missile cities to sort of maybe deter a war by showing their deterrence capacity on video. But effectively, they're built underground. They have blast roofs so that the roofs open and close every time a missile is fired. There's many, many sites, maybe dozens of sites like this with hundreds of missiles dispersed throughout Iran, a very, very tremendous amount of space that they are spread across. And the Iranians claim that they've now put what are called terminal seekers on these ballistic missiles, which mean that when they go into orbit and they start to go into the terminal phase back down to Earth, they can be guided down on the way down so that they can hit with more precision. They claimed about in April, that they had developed that capacity. So, we have to see.
Does that help evade missile defense technology as well? Or are we talking about like dogfights between missiles?
Well, the missile defense, it will hit when you're up in space, basically, when you're up in the atmosphere.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
That's when it hits.
Once you're through, like that's too far gone, or what?
Probably. It's be very difficult to hit at that level. You're optimized to hit when it's still in that arc. But we would greatly increase the level of accuracy potentially when they actually do strike in the CEP, or like the expected area of impact. When we saw the satellite photos of the Israeli missile bases, some of the impacts hit hangars and facilities, but a lot of them landed in the middle of the airbase, kind of not near anywhere exactly. And that's kind of typical for airbase attacks because of how everything's spread out. But if you can improve the maneuverability more on the decline, you could hit it with more precision. We don't know if they've done that or how many they've fixed that to. We're going to find out, I suppose, now. But even without that, if the Iranians would put heavy warheads and fire that missile barrage into an area which is less diffuse, it's more populated, more dense, or even an area like a port or a nuclear facility or a power plant, those strikes don't have to be that accurate. You can do a lot of damage even without absolute accuracy. And now, we have to assess how angry the Iranians are, how much real damage was done inside Iran. I think it seems like a lot. We have to take a look at it, and they'll calibrate their response accordingly. But there'll be very strong voices inside the establishment calling for a very harsh and vigorous response, and no more what you can call half measures. It's just a question of whether Ali Khamenei is willing to sign off on that and what the U.S. response to that may be.
Yeah, and you could talk a little bit about, I'm curious for your take on this. So when Qasem Soleimani was assassinated by President Trump, he was a unique figure in the kind of almost a mythical figure. Running. He had established much of the inside Iran. He had established much of the proxy kind of deterrence and operations, and was also elevated by the United States as this very dangerous person. And then he's killed, assassinated in Baghdad's airport, and that was a real shock to the Iranian system. That because he's not that he's a civilian, but to have he's just gotten off a plane in Iraq and was in a car, and then boom, hit by a drone. And he still remains to this day something that people rally around, are still angry at obviously at Donald Trump about. You just had another IRGC commander killed, along with a slew of other top officials. I would imagine everybody who is involved in decision making when it comes to how to respond to this will know multiple people closely who were killed tonight. And I wonder how that that I assume will also pick at this Soleimani scab. So I wonder how emotions will play into this.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because the Israelis also killed Ismail Haniya in Iran
Right
recently.
into Iran. Mm-hmm.
Clearly, they have hit teams and operators inside Iran. So I think that people in Iran are probably paranoid. They're worried about their physical safety in the elite, very, very much so at the moment. So that's a very effective. Kudos to them. It's a very effective operation that they carried out. I don't know how many more tricks they may have to execute at the moment, but they certainly probably caused a significant shakeup inside the Iranian elite. I saw the Iranians did just before the stream. They appointed a new head of the IRGC to replace Hossein Salami, who was killed in the attack. So there's some continuity that's already being put into place. I think that if you look at it from the perspective of an elite, you are physically in danger yourself in the situation. It's very high stakes. You have to make sure that you can send a deterrent and stop the situation. I think they're probably prioritizing locking down their domestic security focus. But at the same time, if you look at the IRGC, a lot of people are very illogical. They expected to die fighting Israel at some point. A lot of these guys, the core of the Iranian regime, the elite, are people who were young guys in the 1980s Iran-Iraq war. And that was such a coarsening and embittering and radicalizing experience because they were like 16, 17, 18-year-olds, including Qasem Soleimani, he was a young man at that time, fighting World War I style trench warfare, a war that they believed the U.S. had initiated and egged on with Saddam to attack them. So it's in a way they do have like a culture of acceptance of this sort of death and risk, and you die fighting Israel. That's kind of the point. That's kind of why they sign up for it. Not everyone's ideological. A lot of people are rich in the IRGC, a lot of corrupt people and so forth who like to maintain their properties in Tehran. But there is that aspect of it as well too. So that also may inform the decision making, such that they may take more drastic retaliatory measures, even if it comes at the increase of personal risk, because there is sort of an ideological acceptance of that happening. And Qasem Soleimani being killed, before he was killed, like I knew who he was really well. We used to write about him at The Intercept. We followed his activities in Iraq and elsewhere. He's a very, very important figure, but I don't think most people knew who he was. He became like a globally famous figure. He was much more important to the Iranian government in some ways after he died than when he was alive. Arguably, at least in some respects, as a symbol. So, this is another chapter in Iranian history, and they tend to lionize these chapters, and we'll see what happens. But there is one thing different about the situation. The modern way of warfare is so strange. You're carrying out, it's being done with robots and sensors and at a distance, and computers and so forth. It's very much unlike the Iran-Iraq war. In Iran, as I mentioned earlier, they don't really have that mid-level range of retaliation inside Israel, as far as we know. They could fight like a ground war against a target next to them, which Israel's not next to them. They can't really deploy all the armies to cross the whole Middle East. They have lots of supply lines in Syria. Or they could just bomb Israel very intensely with ballistic missiles, and with probably less precision than the Israelis have, because these Iranians don't have a modern air force. They can't fly over there and hit with great precision. They're going to have to fire ballistic missiles, which have a sort of radius of that they miss at, accepted radius of hit. So, if they start firing missiles at Tel Aviv, they could probably seriously damage Tel Aviv or Haifa, one of these cities. But then what? Then what's the next step? What political backlash? What about how Americans feel about that? All these things come into play. So I think that these things make this a very onerous set of choices for the Iranians, even if they are going to take more risks personally at the elite level. But to your point, if you're going to die anyways, if you're head of the IRGC, it's kind of reduce your appetite to take it easy, because you're not necessarily preparing yourself.
Let me share this as well, and you can tell me if this Google Translate is any good. Deputy Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces saying, and do you know this news outlet? What is that? Anyway, people should not feel worried at all.
This is Iran International, yeah.
Okay. So the saying of the Israeli attacks, people should not feel worried at all. He added that Israel, quote, which carried out this barbaric act with the help of America, unquote, will pay a, quote, very heavy price. Does that look like a reasonable translation to you?
So I should add one caveat for this. This news outlet, Iran International and Afghan International, they were originally founded by, as far as we know, by the Saudis. And Barak Rabi, the Axios reporter, said that this was like a Mossad front at one time. He made a very interesting comment about it. So it is like a very, very controversial news outlet. That said, it's not that everything they quote is fake. They do quote some things which are real, and that's not an implausible statement to me. And I've seen other statements from other aspects of more government-aligned news outlets saying much the same thing. It's what we expect
Right.
them to say, that they are going to do a very, very severe, and they say these things even when the war is not happening. To be honest, that there is going to be a significant backlash against Israel. I think that's what you should expect. I think it would be very strange if it didn't happen at this point, because the entire legitimacy of the regime is kind of built on being a resistance regime, so to speak. And they've been hit, like I said, in unprecedented manner in central Tehran, in very central and affluent areas of Tehran, very famous areas of the city. They cannot let those scenes sit as the last image of this conflict. And the Israelis not done attacking them either. And in a way, I remember when the October 2024 attacks happened, that there was a video of the Iranian control room watching it. They were like laughing and like, giggling, and they're having a good time. Salami actually is one of them. They kind of want to use these ballistic missiles, a lot of people, against Israel. So I think that they might do that. I will say also there are capacities that they didn't deploy last time. And the April attacks last year, they used very, very old ballistic missiles. They telegraphed it a long time beforehand. In October, they did give some.
And fact check me on something. At the front end of the stream, I said that they had put smaller warhead sizes, smaller munitions, fewer, not a ton like Netanyahu claimed.
That's what we believe. Yeah, that's what's believed to have happened. That they use smaller warheads as well too. But also they gave the Israelis a heads up the second time as well. Even though they used more advanced missiles which broke through their air defenses, they did give some warning to the Americans, to another party. I doubt they're going to give any warning this time, even though the Israelis probably expecting it because they hit them first. And they probably will use their more advanced missiles, like the Fatah series missiles, which the Iranians claim are hypersonic missiles, which means effectively that you can't predict the path. They're maneuverable on the path, so no air defense can hit them. And they have a very, very strong kinetic impact, so they're very destructive. The Iranians say that they have planned to use these missiles in any major conflict with Israel. And they have a very strong incentive to use them now for two reasons: for deterrence and revenge, but also this is how you test the efficacy and send a message to other parties who see how your weapons work. In the India-Pakistan war, it was tremendous amount of data created, which everyone was focused on, how much data was being created on the different types of missiles being used. These weapons are made for being used. They would like to use them so they can calibrate for future strikes. And I think this could be, there's a historical context to this. Iran has invested very heavily in its missile program. Part of this is due to trauma, because I mentioned the 80s Iran-Iraq war was such a formative event for the people in the Iranian elite. In that war, Saddam Hussein fired Scud missiles at Iranian cities for a very long time, and he did tremendous damage. Nothing like that ever happened in Iran before. They never now used to being fired gigantic missiles at. So they always vowed that they're going to, when they had the opportunity, when they get back in the feet, they're going to build missiles like that themselves, so no one can ever do that to them again. And that's why they leaned so heavily on ballistic missiles and made it such a central symbolic figure of the regime itself too. So now Israel's done to them what Saddam had done to them before. So I expect that they will take it to heart, very, very much so.
And I don't know if you followed the drop site newsroom, but reports coming out of there that Tehran is seeing another wave of bombings, which, it's morning. The sun is up there now, right? This is, we're into the morning in Iran. And so we'll see more. We'll get more about what this new wave of attacks is about. Also hearing, and this is fully in the rumor category, but a rumor going around Iran is that the IRGC commander was not killed by a missile attack, but by a basically a terror team, a team of commandos. That he happened to be sick at home. And was taken out that way. Well, if that's the case, I suspect we will learn about that. Because the Israel did say that it's Mossad carried out on the ground operations. That may have been one.
It's believable to me because they've carried out so many on-the-ground operations in Iran in the last couple of years, for which we never really are aware if anyone was apprehended or what exactly happened. It's not the most transparent system either. So if they've proven that they do have that capacity, so it wouldn't surprise me at all, which would only engender further paranoia inside Iran. If there were people running around with guns, with the addresses of people in the elites, you don't know who's who, that will certainly shape their view of the situation. So it doesn't strike me as unbelievable by any means that they could have been killed in that manner, although we should wait for further confirmation.
Yeah, one thing that Israel does seem to have been able to do over the last couple of years is take their significant advantage when it comes to cyber warfare and surveillance technology, which is really second to none. Like, with the, they can, Pegasus, for instance, can penetrate a phone without you even clicking on the link, like just the touchless penetration of a phone. You get in one phone, you get the passwords. You can, with enough resources, you can, and with a few people being sloppy, you can deeply penetrate. They clearly were able to accomplish that with Hezbollah, whether that developed because of Hezbollah's role in the Syrian civil war, doesn't really matter. Like they were able to deeply penetrate Hezbollah. They clearly have enough intelligence capability that they know where these guys lived. They know what apartments they're in, row houses, and then able to send on the ground teams. It's a significant capacity that they've been able to exploit.
It's very impressive. It's extremely impressive. I was just looking when you're talking. They also reports that Ali Shamkhani, who was a top National Security Council figure in Iran, was also critically wounded in an attack in his own house. He was the guy who a few weeks ago said that they're ready to make a deal with Trump over the nuclear program. So they got, I think we won't have full accounting yet, but they got a tremendous number of most senior figures in the Iranian security establishment, such that it makes you even wonder if they're trying to do a coup inside Iran. If you can wipe out so many leaders, it's not at that level yet, but given how this may escalate, that could be a possibility, in fact, as well. So, it's interesting. I think that the Israelis are very, very good at this type of operation, decapitation operations. And also, for the last 10, 15 years, all their focus has been on these quote-unquote axis of resistance, the Iranian-backed network of groups. They built these latent capacities for many, many years, waiting for the day they can deploy them, just like the Iranians built their ballistic missiles for the day they could deploy them. The Israelis have been building databases of targets and addresses and doing human surveillance and digital surveillance, probably data surveillance, almost certainly on these people, try to figure out the most opportune time to get them. And Iran is a country where there's tremendous polarization and divisions, tremendous discontent. It's not a democracy where people can blow off steam and change the government every few years, although they do have elections. They're not that meaningful. So, it's not beyond the possibility that discontented people inside Iran could be recruited to do attacks. People could be infiltrated into a country. It's a very big country, has many different borders that could be penetrated. That's also possible. There's many, many ways that Israel could strike at Iran, but it doesn't necessarily mean that Iran's going to collapse. These are very targeted strikes in a sense. And they're different from you can't really carry them out. Once you exhaust your target base, it's kind of exhausted. If the war goes on for weeks or months or years, then I think that you run out of these sort of plays that you can do. But at the moment, they've certainly sent a very shocking message to the very top of the Iranian elite that none of them potentially are safe from the hand of Israel, even inside their own homes.
I want to read one statement from the top Democrat, Jack Reed, on the Armed Services Committee, and then I want to get your take on if this might have what effect this would have on Russia, Ukraine, and then I want to let you go because also I'll be back here at this desk for Breaking Points tomorrow morning, so we all got to get some sleep at some point. But so let me play this first. This is my old colleague Akbar Ahmed from HuffPost has a statement here from Senator Jack Reed, who he's very I would call him very pro-military, pro-Israel Democrat on the Armed Services Committee, and the Armed Services Committee remains one of the few powerful committees in Washington. Most committees have been neutered and kind of taken over by leadership in both the House and the Senate, but the Armed Services Committee still has a lot of pull with inside Washington and also at the Pentagon. So he says, tonight, after Israel carried out the large issued the following statement: Israel's alarming decision to launch airstrikes on Iran is a reckless escalation that risks igniting regional violence. These strikes threaten not only the lives of innocent civilians, but the stability of the entire Middle East and the safety of American citizens and forces. While tensions between Israel and Iran are real and complex, military aggression of this scale is never the answer. I urge both nations to show immediate restraint, and I call on President Trump and our international partners to press for diplomatic de-escalation before the crisis spirals further out of control. President Trump must be crystal clear with the American people and the international community in charting a way forward. The world cannot afford more devastating conflict born of short-sighted violence. It's like, so I'll give that a retweet. He's telling Trump, fix this. What do you make of this Democratic response?
It's positive. It's interesting because normally when Israel's at war, there's a tremendous political pressure to, rally to the Israeli flag in the United States. That's and some people like Senator Fetterman, have kind of expressed that traditional position. But this is a very skeptical and even hostile take towards Israeli actions here. I think that this reflects how extremely unpopular Israel has become, especially in the Democratic Party. The base of there were some shocking polls this week about 12% of the Democrats are sympathizing with Israel over the Palestinians, 61% sympathize with the Palestinians. You extrapolate that, and you think that Israel is now being depicted as a warmongering country, which initiating conflicts with other neighbors that do not need to happen. And if you take the face value that they just tanked an ongoing U.S. diplomatic process, it doesn't look very good. And I think even from thinking Democrat opposition to this, I should take as a given almost to a degree, although, doesn't necessarily need to go that way. But I wonder what the Republican response will be, because there's a civil war in the MAGA, or the Republican movement, I would say, over the subject. The more America First, MAGA type people are extremely averse to another U.S. war in the Middle East. They don't want to have it. They thought the Iraq war was a crime and for which no one was punished. And they also have very strong views about wasting resources and so forth and more conflicts in the region. And the neoconservatives, who I say are still very influential and powerful, for whom attacking Iran has always been the most cherished goal, you could say. And there will be a fight there as well. So I'm curious to see how this debate plays out between the two parties. And it's very important because I think Israel is very much counting on rock-solid American support. And to the extent that the statement you shared is sincere and reflects how people in the Democratic Party and Armed Services Committee generally are feeling,
the Democrats are going to follow Jack Reed. Like a normie Democrat looks to somebody like Jack Reed for... Like they don't know how they feel about this stuff. They look
Fetterman like a freak Democrat who kind of does his own thing, I guess.
Yeah,
that's good. Well, that's good because that will make it very difficult to secure this rock solid support. And I think back to the long-term strategic picture, Israel is very reliant on America, and the more they do things in the short term which erode that base of support at a popular level, it's not good. You're trading tactical successes for strategic failures. And I do believe that the statement, put in context, I can't really remember a statement of Israel going to war where there was so much skepticism and harshness almost towards that decision. Certainly wasn't like that on October 7th when they started their own campaign in retaliation to the Hamas attacks. It seems like everyone thinks that the Israeli excuse that this is about the nuclear program and stopping it is kind of BS. In that light, nobody wants to be dragged into another conflict, but the Israelis really do want that to happen.
All right. Well, while I gave that Democrat some flowers, there's some bad Democratic nonsense that I'll read in a second. But what do you think? How do you think this plays into Russia-Ukraine at all? Like, and if you think about what's happening in the world right now, like we are at war. Like this world is at war right now. But do you think that this emboldens? Is this very bad news for Ukraine? Does Russia take this opportunity to be like, you know what, we are rolling into Kyiv? Or do you think that is the dynamics are distinct?
I think it shows the total failure of what Trump had promised to run on, which was ending wars. He failed to end the war in Ukraine. It's going the opposite direction in every way. He hasn't made any progress at all, despite very high-profile efforts diplomatically. Now he said he was going to have peace in the Middle East and leave the region. He's on the brink of being dragged into it, or not dragged in, but at least corralled into some degree the tremendous war with Iran, which is now, as you said, commencing. We're entering an era of more wars than ever, as opposed to an era of peace. I think that from the Ukrainian perspective and the Russian perspective, it kind of depends. If you're China or you're Russia, you desperately want to see America involved in this war. You want to see the war continue in a way, too, because it drains America's defense industrial base.
Right. That was the idea for why the U.S. would support Ukraine, to drain Russia.
Exactly.
Now you could have Russia doing the same.
You can drain, and America has a huge problem with its defense industrial base. For all the money we spend on defense, we don't really produce a lot of things which are necessary in a war. We produce a lot of very expensive, exquisite, and scarce
Rolls-Royce. Yes.
Exactly, which could easily be destroyed the way the Ukrainians destroyed all those Russian bombers with $800 FPV drones in a major conflict. So if you're in Beijing or Moscow, you definitely want this to continue, and you want the two sides to wear each other down. You want America to be arming Israel for a very long time to come, to drain down its own stock so it can't defend its interests in Europe or in East Asia. And you want America to become involved. Because, if you read Chinese defense literature, it's very fascinating. The way they talk about the Iraq War, the way they talk about everything the Americans have been doing in the last 20 years is like, this is a great success because they were fighting wars all the time for no reason. We didn't fight a single war in this time. We focused on ourselves, right, which is what matters. We don't know what they're doing. It was amazing. Let's hope they keep doing it some more. And Iran, to emphasize this, Iran is like 3 times the size of Iraq, population-wise, and in terms of territory. It's very, very different country. It's not a tiny country. It's not the Gaza Strip or Lebanon or, even Syria or Iraq. It's a gigantic country. You're going to be fighting there for a very, very long time if you get in a real war, and that could drain America's resources and lives and morale and everything in a tremendous manner. If, as the Israelis seem to be trying to do, the goal is to get America deeply, deeply involved in the war.
Apparently, Khomeini just released a statement. Let me find that in a second. But let me show you this. If you were wondering how Kamala Harris may have responded to this, Haley Soifer was National Security Advisor to Kamala Harris. She says, this statement from Secretary Rubio conveys that Israel struck Iran without the umbrella of American support, while Biden twice deployed U.S. troops and resources to defend Israel against direct Iranian strikes. Last year, Trump isn't promising Israel defense against an Iranian counterstrike, though it's clearly planning for one. Grateful that successive Democratic administrations have provided Israel with the means to defend itself. So to give you her bio, she is the former National Security Advisor for Kamala Harris, Senior Policy Advisor in the Obama administration, now the head of the Jewish Democratic Council of America, essentially saying, look how weak Trump is, that he's not sending American bombers alongside Israel explicitly, which...
Yeah, this is a ridiculous, this is a very unpopular, I would say, argument. It may appeal to some small segment of the Democratic base and some donors, but I don't think most people in America are, and the Democratic Party especially, are dying to, be more hawkish in the Middle East. It's not really what they're interested in defense of a government which is committing genocide for the last 2 years, no less than that. I think that it's very interesting in the Trump and the GOP side, there was a revolution in the Tea Party and in the MAGA movement, and they've sort of smashed or at least cut down the size of the old establishment, which is still there, but they've been kind of put into place to some degree. Whereas the Democratic Party, those people are very much in charge still. They suppressed their own insurgency, which took place at the same time with the Bernie Sanders kind of movement. They didn't co-opt it, and they're kind of saying this weird dated rhetoric, which Kamala Harris saying the goal should be having the most lethal military in the world. That's not a popular message after 20 years of completely pointless wars. So it's a silly thing. I don't think it's going to resonate with people. I think that it may go over very poorly. I haven't checked the responses to that post, but if I were to guess, people will be quite critical of it, just like they're critical of Chuck Schumer essentially attacking Trump's diplomacy with Iran about a week ago. It's very demoralizing. These are not people who seem serious about changing American foreign policy in the Middle East, regardless of how unsuccessful and painful it's been for a whole generation of people.
No, they don't. So I'll quickly do this statement from Khamenei here. So he says, at dawn today, the Zionist regime committed a heinous crime on our soil, exposing its wicked nature by striking residential areas. It must now await severe punishment. By God's will, the powerful hand of Iran's armed forces will not let this go unanswered. A number of our commanders and scientists were martyred in the attack. Their successors will immediately continue their mission. With this crime, the Zionist regime has sealed a bitter and painful fate for itself, and it will surely face it. The IDF is also out with a statement. Let me see what we've got here. Let me just view this in the channel. I don't want to open Telegram because if I open Telegram, it will not let me then share it. I don't know how to do that. Oh, I don't have this on my Mac? That's impossible. Okay, this is weird. Anyway, giant mystery what the IDF is saying. But Khamenei's statement, how does that comport with his... Is there anything you can draw from that statement that would suggest anything substantive directionally?
He talks a lot. He says a lot of things. He's kind of he's prone to florid language.
He's a big poster, right?
Big poster, very hyperbolic poster.
Yeah.
So, but that said, I do think that they're going to retaliate. And I do think that they want to convey a message of continuity. And the thing with Iran, this is a very deep and coherent society and culture in a sense. They have had many wars in the past. As mentioned, this generation of people who lead the country, their whole upbringing was in war. So I think that it's not as jarring to them. And many people have been killed in the past 10 years, even in Saudi Iran, but also in Iraq and Syria, fighting ISIS and attacks by Israel, the US, and so forth. So I do think that in some sense they're prepared for such an attack, or at least to retaliate to one. And it's not surprising to me he would say that. And I think that the people who thought that maybe, and I think there are some people who believe this, that these attacks may help diplomacy by causing them to capitulate, I think it's very unlikely. It's not the character of the government. They didn't capitulate a whole decade when they're being subject to the most heavy sanctions on nearly any country in the world. They chose to persevere in their perspective with their nuclear program and not back down on it. So I think it's unlikely, as long as they have the capacity to hit Israel, that they're not going to do it. The question is what they're going to do about the United States. And I think they will probably avoid hitting the United States as much as there's some deniability about the U.S., the level of U.S. involvement, at least.
So the IDF statement, which I'm reading on my phone here, basically says that they have secret information that shows that Iran was secretly moving, to build a nuclear weapon. And so that's why they had to act. And they say they have... And then at the very bottom, it says attached are documents from the Iranian nuclear archive that was exposed in 2018. That's not the most persuasive addition to, if they're saying that this is based on new intelligence, but who knows? Maybe, okay. Anyway.
No, I think it's very, very unlikely. We're talking to people about this. Even I had actually a story written about what would happen if a war did happen. I was writing all day, and then I was about to click send, and then, looked up from my screen after 45 minutes, and the war was well underway. I don't think it's plausible in any sense. It's very, I don't think this is even about Iran's nuclear program, to be frank. This is about setting back Iran as much as possible. They don't want...
That's what I said at the top of this. Actually.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If the U.S. and Iran made a deal on the nuclear program, it would create a problem for Israel because it solved the nuclear program problem. And they need that problem to persist so that Iran is sanctioned. It's on bad terms with America. They can't have the problem solved, actually. It would be very bad for them if it was solved, ironically. So I think then this is not really about the nuclear program.
Now people will know I'm not crazy because this is the argument I was making at the top of the stream.
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. It's about setting Iran back, weakening it as much as possible, maybe causing it to collapse or unravel, which I think is unlikely, but it could be a goal of this decapitation strikes that we're seeing at the moment. That's what it's about. I think that the nuclear thing is a sideshow. If they wanted to stop a nuclear weapon, the very most easy way in the world is to have an IAEA certified and monitored agreement, which you could have tomorrow, and there definitely would be no nuclear weapon. This situation is increasing the likelihood of a nuclear weapon, which
Yep.
maybe the Israelis won't even mind, because Iran could be like North Korea. It could be there, but it's, you know, completely aloof, isolated from the whole world, poor, who knows what goes on there. And that might be preferable in a sense.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Apparently there's some word that Trump might speak tonight. I don't know. We'll see. If he does, you guys are on your own for that. We're out of here for tonight. Tomorrow morning, I'll be back on Breaking Points. We're actually going to have Trita Parsi, an Iranian American analyst. We'll be talking about this. I'm sure Drop Site will have, much ongoing reporting on both at dropsitenews.com, also on its Twitter feed and all the other social channels. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for watching both Breaking Points and for watching our live stream here over here at Drop Site News. Thank you for subscribing, whether it's as a premium subscriber over at Breaking Points or over here at Drop Site News. It's what powers our journalism. Any final thoughts, Maz? Thank you also for jumping on last minute. You had to crash on this story, race home, and then jump on here. So I really appreciate it.
No, my pleasure. We'll be following this constantly. I don't know how much sleep I'll get the next night, but we'll be covering this however long it goes on for. And thank you everyone for tuning in. And please do support us so we can do this reporting, which I think others will not do in the way that we're going to do. So
yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah,
that's right. All right. See you later.
See you later.